And we are back discussing the outlook for investments cutting across the sub-Saharan continent. We have been speaking to Mr. Isaac Kamau, who is an investment associate with NABU Capital. NABU Capital published its January monthly report looking at different asset classes. It looked at equities, it looked at treasury bills, treasury bonds, currencies, and Eurobonds. Best-in-class asset was equities, and the worst-in-class was actually bonds, which were down over the period. Now, we are looking at where is Kenya positioned and how does Kenya rank, looking at the different markets, and then we want to bring this conversation to an end by asking then what asset classes will do well, what countries will do well, what then should investors be paying attention to. Isaac, I hope you can hear me if you're back.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll just take it up from where we had stopped. We were looking at the ranking of Kenya. You've told us that the best market was Egypt. How did Kenya rank vis-a-vis her peers across the continent?
Thank you. I think it really depends on the asset class you look at. If you look at equities, Kenya did make about 2.3% versus an average of about 3.1%. So it did rank somewhere in the within the center. However, if you look at currencies, Kenya actually did lose last month. So it did lose about 0.9%, whereas generally across the board, we did see gains of about 1.3%. Now, on currencies, you have to think about it in the greater context, and the fact that if you actually look at the last 5 years, the Kenyan shilling has actually been the third best performer on the continent. So we have just seen a slight short-term change in that trend. I think when it comes to the other asset classes, T-bills, it was more or less in the middle. So a Kenyan T-bill made you about 0.7% over that particular 1 month, whereas all across the continent, you're ending up with 0.6%. So it really does depend on the asset class. But overall, Kenya was one of the better performing markets last month.
All right. Thank you so much for that overview. So then now we're looking at the end of the year. It's February. We have 10 more months, or really give or take 9 more months before we get to the end of the year. How will Kenya perform? What is your outlook when you're looking at Kenya? And the second part of this conversation, what will be the best asset classes that outperform when we look at the rest of the year looking at the continent? Over to you, Isaac.
Great. Thank you. So regarding Kenya, I think the outlook overall is that there are gains to be made all across asset classes. Now, in terms of which asset classes look like they're the best, I think government bonds within the Kenyan market still remain a safe haven. Each month, we do expect it to continue chugging along, providing those consistent gains, similarly to T-bills. On the equity side, we do expect Kenya to keep on gaining. I think the main factor to think about when it comes to equities, and this is not only a factor to Kenya, it's all across the continent, is the fact that the market is extraordinarily cheap, not just in isolation in absolute terms, but if you compare to where other markets all across the world are. So if you look at like the gap in the valuation of, let's say, African markets versus markets in Asia, markets in South America, there's a pretty wide gap. So we generally do expect that to carry the movement in equities. I think answering your question as to what is likely to do best, it's a bit of a tough environment. It's difficult to call exactly what will happen, but I think the overall view is that, particularly within the Kenyan market, as well as most other African markets, we do still expect government bonds to perform very well from a risk-adjusted perspective. We do expect equities do have some gains to be made, but like I said, we're still in a very uncertain environment, and so that may not come true.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think we're coming to the tail end of this conversation. Isaac, is there anything that we might have omitted from this that's pertinent for anybody who's looking at investments, either in Kenya or across sub-Saharan Africa, that you might like to add?
Yes, I think in terms of thinking about the outlook, I think it's important to just think about the fact that we're still in a pretty uncertain environment. Africa is still lagging behind in the race for the COVID-19 vaccine. And that's really a factor to really just watch, because the outlook is heavily dependent on that. I think that is the main thing I just like to leave our viewers with.
Okay, thank you so much for all your time and also the insights coming in from NABO Capital. That was Mr. Isaac Kamau, who is a senior investment associate with NABO Capital, taking us through the performance of Kenya and other sub-Saharan African countries in the month of January. Best asset class, equities. Best country, Egypt. Kenya not lagging too far behind, but if you are looking to invest in Kenya, looks like you might get better returns investing in government treasury bills or treasury bonds, as the environment is still uncertain when it comes to equities. That's all we had for you today. Thank you for your time. See you tomorrow, same time.